In this video, I'm going to analyze the pronunciation of a viewer, and I'm going to ask our native Spanish-speaking viewers to please analyze this person's pronunciation too, and give their thoughts in the comments. You'll see why I'm making that request as we go along. Angie is a native English speaker from the United States who didn't start studying Spanish until she was about 20 years old. Once she began studying Spanish as a college student, she liked it so much that she decided to major in Spanish teaching. And after that, she went on to get a master's degree in Spanish language and teach Spanish 101, 102, 201, and 202 at a university. As a college student, she spent a week in Mexico one summer and 2 months in Ecuador a different summer. And as a master's student, she spent a whole semester in the Dominican Republic. After leaving academia, she didn't want to lose everything she'd worked so hard to learn, so she decided to make Spanish a part of her daily life, and has worked very hard to maintain her language skills through reading, listening to audiobooks, speaking the language whenever possible, and even teaching Spanish to her children. She's now in her late 40s. 20 years have passed since she left the university, and she continues to work on improving her Spanish to this day. Alright, with that introduction, let me give you a little analysis of Angie's pronunciation. Angie has uncommonly accurate Spanish phonetics and phonology. Her tapped and trilled R's are both extremely well articulated, and she consistently pronounces the correct R in the correct spot. So she pronounces a lovely tapped R in words like para, dura, and primero. And she pronounces a very natural-sounding trilled R in words like desparramaron, terriblemente, and demasiado rápidas. Angie's L sounds very Spanishy. Much better than one would expect from a native English speaker. Listen for her L in words like these, that native English speakers often pronounce miles, lado, and golpear. But Angie pronounces much more accurately, more like miles, lado, and golpear. Angie's J sound is very good. She consistently pronounces it like a palatal fricative. Listen to how she pronounces J in words like lejos, debajo, and viejo. In some places, her P and T are maybe not quite as soft as native Spanish P and T, but overall they're quite good. Native English speakers tend to pronounce these P's and T's something like podía, operación, pensó, tiempo, cositas, and patas. But listen for Angie to pronounce them more like podía, operación, pensó, tiempo, cositas, and patas. Her double L and Y are also very good, if a little inconsistent. Sometimes she pronounces them as a voiced affricate, something like j. Other times as a voiced palatal fricative, y. And sometimes she pronounces them more like a strong y sound. All of these are accurate for native Spanish dialects, just not altogether in the same dialect, which is why I say she's inconsistent. But she never pronounces this sound in a way that's outside the range for natural Spanish dialects, which is good. Most of the time, Angie's linking was very good. She pronounced si conseguía entrar with no glottal stop here, and terriblemente excitado with no glottal stop here, and la alta hierba with no glottal stop here or here. But she did insert glottal stops in a few places. Listen for her to say pero que era, like pero que era, para él, like para él, and tanta prisa en meterse, like tanta prisa en meterse. You can also hear Angie pause between words in a couple of places where she should have linked the words. Now, pausing between words certainly doesn't constitute a pronunciation error, but I suspect that those pauses were a way of covering for glottal stops. Around the Spanish-speaking world, the most common way of pronouncing the combination of S followed by trilled R is to eliminate or aspirate the S. So this phrase would be pronounced something like si llegan hasta las raíces, or si llegan hasta las raíces. Angie does this much better than most native English speakers, but my feeling is that there's something not quite right about how Angie reduces this S. I think that she struggles just a bit with this sound combination. In one place, she paused between S and trilled R, which I think was a strategy to avoid resolving that tricky consonant combination. Any native Spanish speakers who could give us their impression of how they hear this S in Angie's recording, I'd love to read your comments. In a couple of places, Angie pronounces syllable final R with a little bit of an assimilation. So rather than entrar, listen for her to say something more like entrar. Dolor, something like dolor. Partir, something like partir. And detenerse y mirar, like detenerse y mirar. Now there's nothing wrong with this pronunciation of syllable final R. It's extremely common in the Andean region of South America and is often considered feminine sounding in other parts of Latin America. In a couple of places, Angie pronounced the letter X as S. Listen for her to pronounce excepción like excepción, and excepto like excepto. Again, there's nothing wrong with this. In fact, while there are some dialects in Latin America that very conscientiously pronounce X as X, with both a K and S sounds, most dialects of Spanish around the world consider this to be a bit of an over-pronunciation or exaggerated pronunciation, especially when X is adjacent to some other consonant. So Angie's pronunciation of these words is perfectly normal for many or even most Spanish dialects. To my ear, her D sounds are very, very good, both the stop and fricative versions, which she usually pronounces in the correct contexts. So she pronounces D as a dental stop in words like corriendo, cuando, and espaldas. And she pronounces D as an interdental fricative in words like picaduras, sentadas, and preciados. However, I do need to note that she occasionally pronounces D as a dental stop in circumstances where the rules I've taught on my channel suggest that she should pronounce it as an interdental fricative. An important note I need to make here is that linguistic rules are not prescriptions for how you must speak, but rather descriptions of how natives do speak under average conditions. But we have to keep in mind that recording yourself reading aloud so that someone can analyze your pronunciation isn't an average condition. Even native speakers tend to overemphasize certain sounds when reading. I'd love to hear what our native listeners think of Angie's D. Now for some areas where I think Angie could use some improvement. In a couple places, Angie pronounces the K phoneme at the beginning of a word with a bit more of a burst of air than is authentic for Spanish. Listen for her to pronounce ¿Qué andarían buscando? More like ¿Qué andarían buscando? In this recording, Angie pronounces the stop or hard version of B and G instead of the approximate or soft version of B and G in too many contexts. Listen for her to pronounce phrases like a lo lejos vio as a lo lejos vio, se desvió as se desvió, empezó a gatear as empezó a gatear, and montón de gusanos as montón de gusanos. I know Angie knows how to pronounce the approximate versions of these sounds because she pronounces them correctly in several places, but she pronounces the stop version in place of the approximate versions frequently. Again, I think she does this in this reading because she's trying to articulate very carefully. The reason I mention B and G separately from D is because she did it even more with B and G. Everything I've mentioned to this point has been extremely minor. I don't think native speakers would even notice most of these things, but there is one pronunciation feature that Angie has that I feel contributes noticeably to her foreign accent, and that is reducing unstressed A to schwa. Listen for Angie to pronounce casa like casa, llevaría like llevaría, estaba en medio like estaba en medio, and frenéticamente like frenéticamente. Now on the one hand, Angie makes this pronunciation fairly consistently. It's not 100% of her unstressed ah sounds, but it's a lot of them. On the other hand, she doesn't do it anywhere near as strongly as most native English speakers, so it's not terribly intrusive. It contributes to a foreign accent, but not a super strong one. And of course, just like anyone, Angie made a couple of random boo-boos that really aren't worth talking about because they don't constitute any kind of pattern. Alright, with that discussion to prepare our ears, let's listen to Angie's recording.
Un momento más tarde, James volvía hacia la casa corriendo cuanto podía. Llevaría a cabo toda la operación en la cocina, pensó. Si conseguía entrar sin que lo vieran la tía Sponge y la tía Spiker. Estaba terriblemente excitado. Atravesó volando, más que corriendo, la alta hierba y las ortigas, sin preocuparse de sus picaduras, y a lo lejos vio a la tía Sponge y a la tía Spiker sentadas en sus mecedoras, de espaldas a él. Se desvió para evitarlas, con la intención de entrar por el otro lado de la casa, pero de pronto, justo cuando pasaba por debajo del viejo melocotonero que estaba en medio del jardín, uno de sus pies resbaló y cayó de bruces en la hierba. La bolsa de papel se abrió al golpear el suelo y las miles de cositas verdes se desparramaron en todas direcciones. James se puso a 4 patas inmediatamente y empezó a buscar sus preciados tesoros. ¿Pero qué era lo que estaba pasando? Se estaban hundiendo en el suelo. Pudo ver perfectamente cómo se revolvían y retorcían al abrirse camino en la dura tierra, y sin pérdida del tiempo, estiró la mano para agarrar algunas antes de que fuera demasiado tarde. Pero desaparecieron justo debajo de sus dedos. Trató de agarrar otras, pero sucedió exactamente lo mismo. Empezó a gatear frenéticamente en un intento desesperado de agarrar las que todavía quedaban, pero fueron demasiado rápidas para él. Cada vez que las puntas de sus dedos estaban a punto de tocarlas, desaparecían en el interior de la tierra, y pronto, en cuestión de segundos, todas sin excepción, habían desaparecido para siempre. A James le entraron ganas de echarse a llorar y nunca podría recuperarlas. Las había perdido para siempre. Pero, ¿a dónde habrían ido? ¿Y por qué motivo habían tenido tanta prisa en meterse en la tierra de aquella forma? ¿Qué andarían buscando? Allá abajo no había nada, excepto las raíces del viejo melocotonero y un montón de gusanos, ciempiés e insectos que habitaban en la tierra. ¿Qué era lo que había dicho el anciano? El primero que encuentren, ya sea microbio, insecto, animal o árbol, recibirá toda la magia. ¡Cielo santo!, pensó James. ¿Qué va a pasar ahora si encuentran un gusano, o un ciempiés, o una araña? ¿Y qué pasará si llegan hasta las raíces del melocotonero? Triste y lentamente, el pobre James se levantó del suelo y se fue a la leñera. Oh, si no se hubiera caído y desparramado aquella maravillosa bolsa. Toda esperanza de una vida más feliz se había desvanecido. Hoy, mañana y al día siguiente y los otros días no habría más que castigos, dolor, infelicidad y desesperación. Agarró el hacha e iba a empezar a partir leña otra vez, cuando oyó un grito a sus espaldas que le hizo detenerse y mirar. Hice toda mi carrera universitaria en español sin el beneficio de ningún estudio en el extranjero. Sin embargo, no sentía que ese fuera un gran problema, porque todas mis clases se daban en español. Todos mis libros de texto estaban escritos en español. Todos mis exámenes, tareas y trabajos finales estaban en español. Por lo que, aunque vivía en Estados Unidos, sentía que estaba esencialmente inmersa en el español de 4 a 6 horas al día durante la semana. Obtuve buenas calificaciones y me sentía bastante segura de mi fluidez en la lengua. Aún así, tenía muchas ganas de tener una experiencia de inmersión en América Latina, así que mi esposo y yo planeamos un viaje de 2 meses en Ecuador. Habiendo tenido tanto éxito en mis cursos en la uni, estaba segura de que entendería bien y podría hablar con nativos de español. Y tuve mi primera oportunidad en el aeropuerto de Quito, pasando por la aduana. Cuando llegó mi turno, me acerqué al mostrador y no entendí ni una palabra de lo que dijo el agente. Era solo un revoltijo de sonidos. Repitió sus palabras, pero eso no me ayudó para nada. Mi esposo tuvo que intervenir y hablar por mí. Después de salir del aeropuerto, nos reunimos con la familia con la que nos íbamos a quedar. Esa noche todos se sentaron a hablar y reír durante horas. Hice todo lo que pude para entender y capté alguna palabra aquí o allá, pero no pude entender la mayor parte de lo que se dijo esa noche. ni al día siguiente, ni al siguiente. La tercera noche, mi esposo me preguntó cómo iban las cosas y me eché a llorar. Le dije que apenas entendía nada, que estaba avergonzada y que tenía miedo de haber desperdiciado mi educación universitaria. Me consoló y me dijo que tuviera paciencia y que las cosas mejorarían, pero no sabía si creerle. A la mañana siguiente me desperté temprano y me dirigí a la cocina. La hija menor de la familia estaba ahí sentada en la mesa de la cocina. Ella dijo, «Buenos días». Y yo respondí, «Buenos días». Me hizo una pregunta y esta vez la entendí muy bien. Respondí y le hice una pregunta. Seguimos así durante algún tiempo manteniendo una conversación ordinaria. Estaba hablando y entendiendo español y me di cuenta de cuál había sido el problema antes. Durante los primeros 3 días no podía escuchar dónde terminaba una palabra y comenzaba la siguiente. Pero esa mañana algo hizo clic en mi cerebro y pude identificar palabras individuales. Y me di cuenta de que realmente las conocía. ¡Qué alivio! Mi comprensión auditiva se expandió muy rápido después de eso y pude interactuar con todos. Durante los meses que pasamos en Ecuador, desarrollé una estrecha amistad con nuestra familia anfitriona y cuando terminó mi viaje, sentí que mi mundo se había duplicado en tamaño.
All right, so what might Angie do to improve her pronunciation? Well, the truth is there's not much that needs improving. There are no sounds that she consistently mispronounces, and it's not apparent that she needs to learn any rules of Spanish phonology. It's more a matter of just improving her consistency. My first suggestion would be to carefully distinguish between the stop and approximant or fricative version of B, D, and G, and make sure to pronounce the approximant or fricative version in the correct context. Native speakers sometimes do the same sort of thing with B, D, and G that Angie did in this recording, just not as frequently as she did. Again, the second and most important suggestion would be to practice not reducing unstressed ah, either by pronouncing it as a schwa or by shortening the duration of the syllable. Again, I know that Angie knows how to fully pronounce unstressed ah because she pronounced it correctly in many places in this recording. She just needs to be more consistent with it. I was going to make a comment about the rhythm of Angie's speech, which is generally really good, but which sometimes seems to follow the stress-timed rhythm of English. But I actually think that Angie's rhythm would become more authentically Spanishy if she corrected her unstressed ah. Apart from these things, it's really hard to make a concrete recommendation for Angie. As I mentioned earlier, her other imperfections are mostly a matter of consistency. Alright, so how would I rate Angie on the Spanish pronunciation evaluation scale? Well, this describes Angie's pronunciation well, but I don't think it's quite generous enough. Angie does much better than pronouncing basic Spanish sounds accurately. She pronounces all Spanish sounds accurately, almost all the time. So I feel that Angie's pronunciation is good enough that it can't be measured with the regular scale and requires the expanded scale. Now, I don't think she's at this level, because I think she falls short of consistently using correct Spanish phonology. So although she demonstrates very clearly that she's capable of pronouncing all Spanish sounds accurately, she doesn't pronounce them in the correct context 100% of the time. So for this recording, I'd give Angie a rating of 8. And I feel like this rating lines up well with how Angie's Spanish would sound to unprepared native ears. While this is true of Angie's speech, easy to understand and foreign accent is not distracting, I don't think it's quite generous enough. But I don't feel that she's quite at this level. I don't think she'd be mistaken as a native speaker. Last year I made a video in which I discussed the topic of how good your foreign language pronunciation can get. In that video I told the stories of 2 of my college classmates who I felt were rare prodigies and whose rating would have been in the 8 to 9 range on this scale. I feel that Angie's pronunciation is nearly at the level of my classmates who I consider rare prodigies. Any natives out there who'd like to share their impressions of Angie's accent, please share your thoughts with us in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video or learned something from it, please give it a like and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. I've just gotten started with round 2 of pronunciation analysis. There are several more videos like this one to come.